So a couple of weeks ago, I was having one of those late night conversations with my friends, and of course, we landed on the topic of conspiracies. Quickly into that conversation, we of course went to the JFK conspiracy, and I'm not here to really take a stance on whether the conspiracy is true or not, because there's a bunch of different variations of it too, and there's so much misinformation about it. But when my friend was talking about the JFK conspiracy, he kept bringing up this information that I found weird, and then he sent me this video on YouTube saying, watch this, and it proves the JFK conspiracy. When I clicked on the video, I've seen this YouTuber before, I've watched a couple of his videos, but I haven't seen this video that he made, and as soon as I started watching it, I was extremely turned off by it. There was so much information in this video that was stretching the truth, and there is just a lot of misinformation about the JFK conspiracy. So I'm just gonna get into this video, and before I start though, I wanna say a couple things that I do enjoy Wendigoon's content, and this video was made over 3 years ago, and he also said it was incredibly spontaneous and low effort, so I do cut him a little bit of slack there. So without further ado, let's just get right into it.
To me, JFK is one of the most obvious cover-ups that have ever happened in history ever, to the point that there is government records and committees made who say, without a shadow of a doubt, that it was a conspiracy.
I mean, yeah, that's true, but there's also so many committees that also say that it wasn't a conspiracy. So you have to really look at the facts.
It's probably been past a minute. The CIA killed John F. Kennedy. Like, hilariously so, but we'll get to that.
All right, so here's where he cements his viewpoint into what the JFK conspiracy actually is. He clearly states here that the CIA killed John F. Kennedy, and as you will be able to see, that he really tries to anchor everybody into this viewpoint that the CIA did it.
1963, November 22nd, John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie are going through Dallas on a motorcade. Riding in front of them was the governor of Texas and his wife, basically Mr. and Mrs. Connolly. In the front row was CIA agents O'Connolly and Greer. Greer was driving.
So this is a small thing, but he makes a lot of these claims in the video. But he says that Greer and Connolly are sitting in front, but he also says that Connolly is sitting behind Connolly, so that just doesn't make sense, of course. But what he meant to say was that it was Agent Greer and Roy Kellerman who was in the front seat. But another thing is, of course, he had to say that these guys were CIA, which they are not. Why would the CIA be riding in the presidential motorcade? The CIA has nothing to do with like presidential security. Greer and Kellerman were Secret Service agents. He does this a lot in the video, and I can assume that it's because he wants to solidify that viewpoint of the CIA killing Kennedy, but that's just not the case.
I'll go ahead and say this to be generous. I do believe Lee Harvey Oswald was one of the shooters. However, there is not a doubt in my mind that he was not the only shooter.
So I'm stopping here because, like I said before, we really want to look at all the facts here. So when Wendigoon over here says that he does believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was one of the shooters, to me, that's an odd viewpoint, because if you're believing that the CIA was responsible for JFK's death, the CIA, in my opinion, would not be hiring Lee Harvey Oswald to be one of the shooters. And let me tell you why that is. Not a lot of people know this, but Lee Harvey Oswald was discharged from the US Marines. And quickly after that, he went to the US Embassy in Moscow and renounced his US citizenship. He also gave a slip that said that he wanted to be a member of the Soviet Union. Lee Harvey Oswald was also known to embrace Marxism. So if I was the CIA, I'd be a lot more hesitant to kind of recruit this guy to assassinate the president. So at least to me, depending on what you believe in the JFK incident, I think that connecting the CIA with Lee Harvey Oswald is kind of a huge stretch.
So let me explain. Remember that first shot that I mentioned that was supposedly a miss? Well, what happened is that bullet skipped off the ground, shot to the other side of the street, and hit a man who was standing about 100 yards out, whose name was James Teague. James Teague stopped, was watching the motorcade go by, which then a bullet skipped off the concrete and hit him in the cheek.
This is one of the most annoying parts of the video. I really hated how he went into James Teague's story, because he prefaces this section as like what actually happened, and he proceeds to mention that James Teague, the bystander, was struck by a bullet, which although injured, James Teague was not struck by the bullet. He was either struck by shrapnel or fragmentation of the bullet. I say this with being a small issue just in preparation because he soon proceeds to totally rewrite James Teague's very own testimony and construct it in like his very own way. And also he then does like one of these, aha, I figured it out type of moments.
The big problem to this is James Teague's personal testimony. See, he was walking by the street as the parade was going by and he didn't take much care for it. The reason he stopped and turned to face the motorcade was because he heard a gunshot. Now, if he heard a gunshot, took time to stop and turn, there is no way the first shot was the same one that hit him. But it would make sense if it was the second or the third or more after that.
Yeah, this is where I lost it. So he says here that the reason James Teague stopped and turned to face the motorcade was because he heard a gunshot, but James Teague didn't say any of that.
It wasn't but about 30 seconds till the presidential motorcade rounded the corner of Main Street to turn over onto Elm. But right after the presidential car had turned the corner, I heard these three loud noises, and I jumped behind the concrete abutment, which is between Main and Commerce. Just look there on the curb, there's a very visible mark on the curb where a bullet had struck. Either a fragment of the bullet or a piece of the concrete. It flew up and scratched my face.
I mean, you guys just heard the gunshot to the face survivor, Teague. And might I say, for being shot in the face, he's got pretty good skin. But if you couldn't tell by his very own testimony, you'll see that he never said he wasn't paying much attention to the motorcade. Also, if you were at the presidential motorcade with this huge crowd, I'm assuming you would be somewhat paying attention to the motorcade. I mean, as the president of the United States passing by, why wouldn't you? But James Teague does then say that after hearing 3 loud noises, he ducks for cover. He also then meets up with a police officer who was on a motorcycle, and he starts to feel like he has been struck by something in the face. And the police officer also notices that he's bleeding from the face. At this point, they both notice that he's either been struck by shrapnel or a piece of debris. So they checked around and they did in fact find the spot where the bullet skipped off of. Wendigoon also does touch on this, but he does completely dismantle James Teague's testimony. And this does make sense that James Teague would be struck by either shrapnel or fragmentation or something, and then moments later he will recognize that he's been hit, because I'm sure there's tons of adrenaline going through him at this moment. I mean, I'm sure there's so much chaos going on, like the president just got shot. I mean, everybody's screaming and yelling. And of course, if you wanted to see this full testimony, it's in the description, so you can check it out.
The reason everyone and the official report sticks with 3 shots is because there were 3 shell casings from Lee Harvey Oswald's window, as well as 3 at least confirmed bullets on the ground.
And the fact that James Teague heard 3 shots and a majority of the witnesses heard 3 shots. But of course, we do have other witnesses that say otherwise, so we do have to look at more of the facts.
However, JT's testimony here messes all that up.
No, it doesn't.
3 loud noises.
The governor who got shot along with Kennedy, John Connolly, says the exact same thing. He says that there is not a doubt in his mind, nor his wife's, that the bullet that hit Kennedy and him was 2 separate shots.
So he's definitely right here. John Connolly did publicly kind of say that he did not believe in the Warren Commission report and the fact that he believed that he was shot by 2 shooters. But I'm going to show you guys a couple videos and I'm going to blur a little bit of it. And well, you already know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to show you the Zapruder film and the Orville Nix film. And if you're interested in the subject, I of course really advise you to watch these films, but do take them with a grain of salt. They're a little graphic. But if you see here, both John Connolly and John F. Kennedy respond at the exact same moment of getting shot. They both respond to the same exact bullet. So I don't know where he's getting this information that there was a time span in between these 2 shots.
But it is literally impossible to fire a bolt-action rifle in the amount of time between what would be Kennedy getting hit and the governor getting hit. The space between the 2 shots was long enough that they could tell a difference in when each of them was hit, but not fast enough for someone to rechamber around and get a second shot off.
The magic bullet theory is definitely weird, but the only thing that I really find weird about it is the fact that the bullet stayed intact. We all know that bullets do weird things when they hit walls or hit bone, of course, but the fact that the bullet stayed intact going through John F. Kennedy's neck, through Connolly's chest, into his wrist, and then out into his other wrist, I think it was. I might have just messed that up. But the fact that the bullet stayed almost perfectly intact through that, I think that that's a little bit of something to talk about. But of course, he just brushes it over. I don't know why he just brushes this point over, when to me, that's one of the biggest points in proving a conspiracy or proving a second shooter.
Anyway, if Texas Red here was off on the other side of the road firing shots toward the motorcade too, then one of his shots could have crossed through, striking the president in the neck and continuing, which would make more sense why Kennedy was hit in the neck, bent forward, and then one of Lee Harvey Oswald's shots hit the governor in the back.
I mean, I don't know how this really makes sense, how somebody would get shot in the throat and then they'd be going like this when getting shot in the front of the throat. That makes no sense to me, that he'd be gripping the back of his neck. I mean, yeah, you can argue that it's the exit wound, but I don't think people really do that. Also, the fact that John Connolly reacted to the same exact bullet, if it came from the front, would mean that it had to go through John Connolly's chest first, and then through Kennedy's throat, which that trajectory makes no sense. The shooter would have to come from literally in the front cabin of the car.
There was another camera on the other side of the street that was recording that day that was filming the motorcade from the other direction. In it, everyone who has watched that film has said they can see with absolute certainty puff of gun smokes appearing from the opposite side of the street on what appears to be a grassy knoll. Not only that, but these puffs of smoke are in time with the times that bullets struck the motorcade.
So the Orville Nix film is a tiny bit of a mystery, and I'm really emphasizing the tiny bit part because there's not that much information about it, and there's a lot of inconsistencies with his story. But what I'm going to say is there's an interview with the press in the description with him, and he states that he gives a duplicate copy to the FBI, while he sold the original film to the United Press International. He says this even though he says then that the original film is missing a few frames. But if he gave the FBI a duplicate, he gave the original to the United Press International, then how are there frames missing from the FBI having it? So that just doesn't make sense. And then along with that, he gives me a reason to believe that he could be kind of lying about this information. Because I mentioned before, he sold the original film to the United Press International. And upon selling this film, he was granted $5,000. And in today's money, if you do the calculations, that's about $49,000. And for a man like that, that was a substantial amount of money. I mean, oh my God, I would sell anything for $49,000. So this also gives me a tiny bit to believe that he could be trying to milk it a little bit more to maybe get a little bit more money out of it. But that's simply based on opinion, and the only real fact is that he was paid for the original film.
In 1976, a group was formed called the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Now you may be asking, why in 1976, 13 years after the president's death, did they form a committee just to talk about this event? And it's because it came out that the CIA was purposefully hiding information regarding the assassination.
All right, so let me put it this way. Johnny Harris put it better, but at the time of Kennedy's assassination, we were at the height of the Cold War. And the CIA was also in the middle of trying to assassinate Fidel Castro. If we were to have a full investigation onto whether this is a conspiracy or not, whether it be the CIA or not, that would cause extreme paranoia with the US citizens. I mean, we were already on the threat of nuclear war and having hypothetically a Russian or Soviet assassination on US soil. So we kind of had to be like, yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald did it. There's no further investigation. He did it. He was a lone shooter, even if that wasn't the case. But now, of course, we've had so many other commissions and so much technology to re-look at this information.
New technology was found in 76 that analyzed this data more closely. Using audiograph equipment, and this is my interpretation of that, they managed to pull the audio from the original Zapruder film and picked out that there were 6 shots fired in this amount of time of the film, not the original thought out 3. They were so reliant on this that, as I mentioned before, they made a whole committee just to relook at all this information.
The Zapruder film didn't have audio, so I think he just got that wrong. The most famous audio was taken from a police motorcycle that was then observed by dictabelt technology. I don't know what audiograph technology is, what he states there. I tried looking it up, couldn't find anything. But although the House Select Committee of Assassinations did find 6 shots, every other modern piece of technology disproves that. So I left all the audio files in the description, so if you guys can even figure out one of the gunshots in that audio file, I would love to hear what it is, because they are so destroyed, those audio files. They sound disgusting. I would also like to say that the main reason the House Select Committee of Assassinations did deem that it was likely a conspiracy was that they thought there was 2 shooters based on these 6 shots. That's the only reason to make them believe that it was likely a conspiracy.
You may be asking yourself, well, what happened to the other film and all the information? And that's the best part. The day after they used that other film footage to determine that there was a second shooter, it all disappeared overnight from a CIA lockup.
Again, not the CIA, this is the FBI that had their hands on the footage, and they only lost a few frames, according to Orville Nix.
This is the official statement they gave in the end. The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence available to it, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as the result of a conspiracy. The committee is unable to identify the other gunmen or the extent of the conspiracy. That is a government organization coming together and saying, yeah, something definitely weird happened.
Ah, yes, the Book of Facts. We're coming back to it. Like I just said, that the only reason that the committee said that it was likely a conspiracy was the fact that their equipment determined that there was 6 shots. But like I said before, this claim has been debunked by so much modern technology.
As I've already mentioned, the CIA lost all the data the day after it was used in court to prove that this guy was actually there.
Oh my god, again, it's the FBI, not the CIA, and they just lost a few frames, not all the data.
Aside from that, at the least, their handling of John F. Kennedy's motorcade was hilariously bad.
Dude, this guy thinks the CIA is in charge of everything. Holy shit. The CIA has nothing to do with the presidential security, especially during a motorcade. That's the job of the Secret Service.
Also, keep in mind what I mentioned earlier, Greer and O'Connery, the two CIA agents who were in the front of the car. As soon as the first shot rang out, Greer did not try to run away or drive away or anything else that's standard of CIA training.
As you can see in both the Zapruder film and the Nix film, the motorcade quickly speeds away after the driver realizes what's happening. Also, the driver is a Secret Service agent, not CIA.
He brought the car down to a 7-mile-an-hour speed, and him and O'Connery hunched forward and put their shoulders up.
They did not do that. Like, you can see in the film that they did not hunch over or anything like that to prepare for the bullets.
To adequately explain the rest of this, I need to bring in another character, the Umbrella Man.
He goes a lot into the Umbrella Man here, but the way he talks about it is just retarded. So I'm just going to make it short for you guys. He says that he raises the umbrella at the time of the gunshots, which is untrue. I mean, you can see the Umbrella Man right here. You can see that he does not raise the umbrella. It is raised throughout the whole time. And he also states that the Umbrella Man just came out and said, "Ah, yes, I am the Umbrella Man. I held the umbrella." But no, that's not exactly what happened.
The CIA brought in a man wearing a suit, holding an umbrella. The man walks into the court and goes, "Ah, I am the Umbrella Man, and this is that umbrella." And the judge went, "Seems all right to me." There was no double check. There was no follow-up. They're like, "That man has an umbrella. He's got my vote."
The Umbrella Man then came out as Louis Stephen Witt, who at the time he was protesting JFK's father, who often carried a black umbrella. But JFK's father was also known for his policies of appeasement towards Hitler, so this was Witt's reason of protesting. Yeah, I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but to me there's no evidence to suggest otherwise, so right now I'm stuck to believing that. Also, this is the biggest thing. If you were CIA, are you telling me that you're gonna have a guy in a suit with a black umbrella be your signal? That is retarded. I've seen 30 different signals used in baseball that are a lot more secure than that.
Also, the initial Warren Commission, which was the first one that happened immediately after this, that determined that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter and he acted alone, was made almost entirely up of CIA members.
Now, this is actually kind of cool because I didn't know this, but he says this to disprove the Warren Commission, and I always thought that the Warren Commission was probably not the best thing to trust because everybody's always told, like, oh, it's them investigating themselves. But in reality, the Warren Commission was made up of 7 people, only one of them being CIA. And if you want to say that, oh, because Alan Dulles was head of the CIA at some point and it's rigged in his favor, 1, you're a sheep, and 2, he was not the head of the CIA at the time of Kennedy's death, so blow me.
There was a guy working at the CIA whose name rhymes with George
W. Bush.
George Mush was one of the people put over this whole motorcade route and one of the people elected to keep the president safe. So much so that he was in Dallas on the day that this all happened. So keep in mind, he failed his job harder than anyone can possibly fail. His job was to make sure nothing happens to this guy, and he got shot at least twice. Not long after this happened, that man was promoted to director of the CIA.
He says not long after, but that was actually 13 years later, so I don't know if that's really not long.
And then another position.
That is now 38 years later.
Not only that, but when George Mush was asked years later about where he was on the day of Kennedy's death, he said, "I don't remember." You were in Dallas.
George Bush was never proven to be in the CIA during the time of the assassination, nor whatever the hell he was talking about here. If someone can please find me a reliable source that states that George W. Bush was at any of these places that he states here, please let me know, because I would love to actually see some of that. But the claim that he's talking about originates from a book titled Family of Secrets, and like Wendigoon's video, this book is closer to satire. But none of these claims he just made are proven.
I should also mention, before anyone decides that I am a threat for this, this is a joke. It's all a joke. This is post-irony humor. This is entirely educational. I believe none of it, and you should believe none of it. And everything is a joke.
Yeah, that's probably the most accurate thing he said this video. All right, I don't really want to hate on Wendigoon for this video. I do realize that this video was made a while ago, and he does make pretty good videos, and I still watch him occasionally. This one was just not it for me. And I do feel like that there's just so much misinformation spread about the JFK conspiracy, even though there's so much good information that we can talk about and can have a great discussion about. While I do believe we should distrust the government and challenge a lot of things that they say, I do hate how nowadays, whenever there's a tragic event, people's immediate thought is just, oh, it must be the government again. Especially when they're taking things from like trust me bro sources like this, where they're just speaking out their ass a lot of times for views. So please don't send any hate to Wendigoon. I did notice that he cites a lot of his sources now, so that's great. So thank you guys, but look into what you're told.